The courtroom was silent. Lawyers shifted in their seats, reporters leaned forward, and even the bailiff looked uneasy. Something was off. At the center of it all sat Karoline Leavitt, sharp, confident, and ready to defend herself. She had come to court prepared for a legal battle, but what she didn't expect was the judge himself becoming her biggest opponent. The moment she spoke, the judge's smirk turned into a sneer. "I don't take orders from political nobodies. Sit down or get out," he barked. A ripple of shock spread through the courtroom. Judges were supposed to be impartial, fair, professional. But this was personal. Karoline didn't flinch. She met the judge's glare head on. Because what the judge didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have expected, was that he had just picked a fight with the wrong woman. And before this hearing was over, he wouldn't be giving orders. He'd be in handcuffs. The air in the courtroom grew thick with tension. People exchanged glances, unsure if they had really just heard what they thought they had. A judge mocking a defendant, dismissing her based on personal bias? This wasn't just unprofessional. It was outright illegal. Karoline sat still, her expression calm, but her mind was already working. She had spent years studying the law, fighting for truth, and now she was going to use it. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "I have the right to be heard." The judge smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You have the right to do what I say. That's how this works." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even those who didn't support Karoline knew this wasn't right. She tilted her head. "Is that so?" The judge waved a hand dismissively. "I don't have time for your political nonsense. Sit down." Karoline could have argued. She could have raised her voice, but she didn't need to, because she had come prepared. And in just a few moments, it wouldn't be her who was on trial. It would be the judge. Instead of backing down, Karoline calmly reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. She placed it on the table with a deliberate thud. "Your Honor, before I take my seat, I'd like to submit something into the record." The judge rolled his eyes, barely glancing at her. "Denied," Karoline smirked. "You might want to read it first." She slid the folder onto the judge's bench. Inside, a detailed report exposing his corruption. For the first time, he hesitated. He flipped open the folder, and his face went pale. The courtroom leaned in as Karoline began reading aloud. "Large undisclosed payments from wealthy donors. Rulings that mysteriously favored certain political figures. Emails proving backdoor deals between the judge and special interest groups." Gasps filled the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Lawyers exchanged stunned looks. The judge's hand tightened around his gavel. "This is nonsense," he snapped. Karoline didn't stop. "There's just one more thing, Your Honor. This information has already been sent to federal investigators." The judge froze. His hands began to shake. He had walked into this courtroom thinking he was in control. Now he was realizing he had made a terrible mistake. The judge's hands trembled as he gripped his gavel, his once smug expression twisting into one of pure panic. "You think you can intimidate me?" he barked, his voice rising. But there was no confidence left in it, only desperation. Karoline remained calm, steady, unshaken. "Oh no, Your Honor. I don't need to intimidate you. The truth is doing that for me." Then the courtroom doors swung open with a heavy thud. 2 federal agents stepped inside. Gasps filled the room. Reporters clutched their pens. Attorneys leaned forward, and even the bailiff took a cautious step back. The judge's face drained of color. "Judge Thompson," one of the agents announced, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "You are under investigation for judicial misconduct, bribery, and obstruction of justice." The judge's breath came fast and shallow. This is a mistake. I am a judge. I demand this case be thrown out." The agents didn't move. Karoline leaned in slightly, her voice soft but powerful. "Your Honor, I think it's time you step down." The judge's chest rose and fell rapidly. He looked around, but there was no one left to protect him. He had abused his power for years, now his power was gone. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. No one moved, no one spoke. All eyes were on the judge. The lead agent stepped forward, pulling out a warrant. "Judge Thompson, place your hands where we can see them." The judge shook his head violently, his voice cracking. "This is outrageous. I am the law in this courtroom." The agents didn't flinch. Not anymore. The officer stepped closer, and before the judge could protest again, click, the handcuffs snapped around his wrists. Gasps and hurried whispers spread through the room as reporters scrambled to document the moment. A sitting judge arrested in his own courtroom? This was history in the making. Karoline watched, her expression unreadable. She hadn't needed to argue. She hadn't needed to shout. The truth had done the work for her. As the judge was led past her, his face burning with humiliation, he hissed, "This isn't over." Karoline tilted her head slightly, offering the faintest of smirks. "Oh, I think it is." And with that, the gavel fell, not from the judge's hand, but on his career. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. Judge who insulted Karoline Leavitt arrested. Courtroom chaos. Corrupt judge taken down in front of shocked audience. Television networks played the footage on repeat. The moment the judge's arrogance crumbled, the second those handcuffs locked around his wrists. Legal experts weighed in, calling it one of the most humiliating judicial scandals in history. Meanwhile, Karoline remained unfazed. When reporters crowded her outside the courthouse, shoving microphones toward her, she simply said, "The law protects those who stand up for what's right. No one, not even a judge, is above it." Her words went viral, sparking a wave of support and outrage. People demanded deeper investigations into other judges, other courtrooms, other corrupt officials hiding behind their power. For Judge Thompson, the consequences were just beginning. The state's judicial board launched an immediate review of his past rulings. Cases he thought were buried were now being reopened. His career, over. His reputation, destroyed. And yet Karoline never once gloated. Because for her, this wasn't about taking someone down. It was about proving that justice still exists. And on that day in that courtroom, justice had won. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge. It was about something much bigger. It was about power, abuse, and accountability. About those in authority who believe they can twist the law to serve their own interests, until someone stands up and says, "Enough." Judge Thompson thought his position made him untouchable. He thought his power gave him the right to mock, dismiss, and silence those he didn't like. But in the end, the truth was more powerful than any gavel. Karoline Leavitt didn't need to yell. She didn't need to argue. She let the facts do the talking. And in the end, the man who had spent years judging others was the one being judged. But here's the real question. How many more corrupt officials are out there, hiding behind their titles? And more importantly, who will expose them next? Because at the end of the day, justice isn't about wealth, status, or connections. It's about one simple truth. No one is above the law.